If you were a Muslim, you know you would wage jihad against David Wood. But David and I are here to tell you not to fall for what the jihadis sell you. The jihad is still on, and so are we. And we will fight to the end for the right to be free. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, This Week in Jihad is back and better than ever. I apologize for the long delay. It was unavoidable, and we are here with the master of disaster himself, Dr. David Wood. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, David.
Hey, how you doing, Robert?
Never better, never better.
Hey, people are impressed. People are impressed because we're actually on time.
We are on time, and
No,
we are full of jihad.
yeah, that's because whenever I go live with AP, one of us, I won't say which one he is, one of us always makes us 10 to 20 minutes late.
I am Joe Punctual, David. This is a punctual show. Whatever else it is, it's a punctual show.
Oh, you can tell by the suit. As soon as I see the suit, I'm like, oh, this dude is on time. I know
It's
it.
the suit. It's the suit actually that makes me on time. You cannot be late in a jacket like this. So, there is plenty of jihad. There is lots going back weeks since we were here, but I'm only going to go back a week, David, in honor of the name of the show and in honor of the fact that we have so much to discuss, even in the space of the last week.
Yeah, and in honor of the fact that if you tried to cover all the jihad from the past few weeks, then you'd have to be like that. Remember that Micro Machine dude?
Micro Machine is beyond
You don't
me. I
remember
don't
the
know.
Micro Machine commercials from when I was a kid? Cause you would have been you wouldn't have been a kid then.
No, I
But
was like 30.
he had they had the fastest talker in the world. The guy who was like in the Guinness Book of World Records as being the fastest talker, and he did the Micro Machine. But you'd have to be like that if you wanted to cover all the jihad that goes on.
Yes, unless we wanted to do a 4 or 5 hour show. And I know you kids today, you do that with these debates, 6 hours, 7 hours. I think, how on earth does anybody actually watch this? You could tell me in the comments. Oh yes, we love the 6 hour debates, but I
Some
don't
people
know.
do that. Some people do that. Yeah, I'm like you. I kind of max out at like an hour, maybe two if I'm really, really interested.
Yeah, I don't get it. I guess it comes from once again the TV generation, David. It's another television reference because probably growing up in the 60s and 70s, I got used to things being wrapped up in a half hour or an hour. This is an hour long program. That's long as far as I'm concerned. And I know you're not going to get a 6 hour show out of me. I remember the last debate I did, which I hope will be the last debate I do, given how pointless and stupid they are. But in any case, he wanted 2 or 3 hours, and I thought, what for? Who could even have the patience? But anyway, so jihad, David, jihad. Let us go to a group of articles that I have set aside today that are a little bit different from what we did before our long summer vacation. And they have to do with the supremacist impulse that is deeply embedded within Islamic doctrine, as you, of course, well know. Lots of supremacism this week. For example, out of Malaysia, the National Council for Islamic Affairs has announced that it is going to reopen a controversy that was very hot a few years ago over whether non-Muslims are allowed to use the word Allah for God. Now, of course, the word Allah means God, or strictly speaking, the God. Arabic-speaking Jews and Christians do tend to use it, although many, to be sure, particularly Coptic Christians in Egypt, shy away from using it because of its close association with Islam. But it does leave a kind of hole for Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews if you do not allow it. But they're not actually the ones not allowing it. It's way over in Malaysia. So what is this all about, David? I thought Islam was all about tolerance.
Yeah, you know what's weird is it's like they'll complain no matter what you do, right? Like if you're if you're a non-Muslim and you're not wearing a hijab because you're a non-Muslim, they want you to wear a hijab, right? They want you to you need to adopt Islamic dietary laws and Islamic garb and all these things. And then if you're in a different place and you say, hey, you guys call God Allah, I'll call God Allah. No, you won't. You won't adopt our ways of speaking and our ways of doing anything. You're a different filthy creature. You're in a different category. And it's like, it doesn't matter what you do, right? It's just they're it seems contrarian by nature, right? Like whatever you're doing, we want to complain and tell you to do the opposite.
That's it. And so the idea is to always make you wrong and put you on the defensive all the time in every case. In Cyprus, where about a third of the country is already occupied by Turkey, and the Christians were, for the most part, forcibly expelled. In that part, there is a 12th century monastery, the Apostle Andrew Monastery. And it has become very popular as a place for pilgrimage. But now it is about to be turned into a mosque. What here is the idea? Once again, David, I'm confused because I thought Islam was supposed to be tolerant.
Well, I mean, if Muhammad is truly the pattern of conduct for Muslims, I mean, what did he do? I mean, the Kaaba was a pagan center of worship. And he took it over, and they made it their holiest site. Have you noticed they kind of really want to take over people's holiest sites and convert them? I mean, look at Jerusalem, look at Hagia Sophia, everywhere.
Look at New York City and the plans for the Ground Zero Mosque 10, 15 years ago.
That was my biggest video of all time, where other people were talking about the Ground Zero Mosque and so on. I actually went down there outside the Burlington coat factory that they'd purchased because it was damaged when the part of the plane went through the building. And then they build it. And then they buy it, and they said they were building 18-story mega mosque or something
16.
like that. Yeah. So I just, everyone else was talking about it. I was like, well, I'll just I live here, so I'll just jump on the train and go record a video. Went down there, recorded a video, and that's what I pointed out. I pointed out, like, wait, from the time of Muhammad, there's always been this goal to take over people's, center of worship and so on. So we don't exactly have that in New York. There's no like the place, but you could take over an economic center, and it's exactly what they did, and try to build a 16-story mega mosque. But yeah, I got almost like 4 million views on that because people weren't aware of that. They don't know that. They don't know that this has been going on for 14 centuries. And you point out in your book, The History of Jihad, all the taking over of like Hindu temples and so on, and then taking the idols and smashing the idols so that they could trample on them as they walk into their new mosque and so on. And it's just, it's an obsession. And I don't know. I don't think people should be falling for this.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. I didn't know about your video, but I was, of course, involved in that controversy to a tremendous degree. Pamela Geller and I led rallies against the Ground Zero Mosque and ultimately beat it, at least for the time being. But that was the point that I raised that was almost universally denied and even ridiculed in the mainstream media. And I went down there myself with Geraldo Rivera, and he and I did a Fox segment walking from the Burlington Coat Factory to the World Trade Center site, which is like kind of a block and a half or 3/4 of a block. It's just you turn the corner and it's right there. Mm-hmm. And talking about this. And New York Magazine, I met the New York Magazine reporter Mark Jacobson, and he took my picture in front of the Burlington Coat Factory, and they had an article about what a terrible person I was and how I was completely wrong, and that there was no 14th century tradition of building mosques on the sites of the sacred sites of other peoples or the site of jihad victories. And this stuff was just completely fictional. But it was confidently presented as if it was the way it was. And of course,
Isn't it insane to deny it though? Like
yeah. I mean, when you've
like
got the Temple Mount, and the Temple Mount is, why is it called the Temple Mount? Well, there was a temple there.
yeah.
And what's there now? A couple of mosques. I
Uh-huh.
mean, that's the most obvious thing in the world. What's Hagia Sophia? What does that mean? Well, it's Greek for holy wisdom.
Uh-huh.
Why is a mosque called Holy Wisdom? Because it was a cathedral. The examples are right there in front of you. You know, Pope Benedict XVI went to Damascus, and he went to the Umayyad Mosque, which is, even in the media, as they were denying this, they would say the Umayyad Mosque, formerly the Cathedral of John the Baptist. Well, what happened? Did they just decide to make it a mosque? No.
Yeah, Christians one day said, "Hey, we need to take all our coolest sites and make them mosques in a show of generosity." Although I think today there are plenty of Christians who'd go along with that.
They'd
Yeah,
love it.
let's give them every church we have in a show of bridge building.
Well, they're
Kind of
doing it. Did you see the video in Britain not long ago? Muslim guy standing out in front of a church that is now a mosque, and saying there are churches that are now mosques all over Britain, and we're here to stay. This is the sign of our presence and our ultimate victory. And I thought, well, here it is again, that there are mosques all over Britain too that are not churches, but he didn't make a video in front of them. He made a video in front of a mosque that was a church, precisely because of this supremacist impulse in Islam.
Indeed.
Indeed. In France, as opposed to indeed, we have a McDonald's in Paris, in I don't know how to say this. How do you say this, David? Saint Denis, Seine, Saintdenis,
Yeah.
Saint Denis, something.
Yeah,
you know.
pretty much everything in French is pronounced fon. So
Yeah.
that's what
There.
I do when I go.
That's where the McDonald's is. And they closed it, not because people didn't want their burgers, but because they needed to have prayers for Eid al-Adha. And as it turns out, one of the employees is related to a jihadi and thought it would be a great idea to just take over the McDonald's for Islamic prayer. Now I ask you, if a group of Christians had gone to a McDonald's and closed it down to conduct a prayer service inside the McDonald's, what do you think the reaction would be?
Peace and sunshine, Robert. No, they'd have run those Christians out of there and probably arrested everyone. It is interesting though, because notice it's always like taking over the sacred sites, taking over locations. We've seen over and over again, taking over sections of a street. And I used to see that in New York, especially on Fridays. I would see entire streets just blocked because of all the cab drivers and stuff who just block an intersection to go do their prayers and so on. So roads would actually be blocked. I mean, it's amazing. No one ever stopped them. It's just understood. Hey, they get to block the roads completely to go for their prayers on Friday. And notice, can you as a Muslim pray without blocking a road or without showing yourself in the street? Of course you can. So there's some sort of inclination they want to do that. They want to go out in a kind of show of force and showing who's taking over and so on. And it's just amazing because these are the same people who claim to respect Jesus, who condemned that sort of praying to be seen by others. He condemned it.
Yes.
Said you have if you're praying to be seen by others, you have your reward. You don't have any reward with God.
But the praying to be seen by others in Islam is designed to strike terror in the enemies of Allah, as the Quran directs. That is, to make the non-Muslims aware that the Muslims are there and to be afraid because they're there and they are asserting their presence in a way that is deliberately designed to inconvenience the non-Muslims and get them used to the idea that they have to submit.
And by the way, isn't it ironic that you have all the terrorist attacks and they are meant to terrorize the unbelievers. And then you had these other kinds of show of force, which are meant to sort of terrorize you in a different way, but to warn you of things to come, so that you can get on board now before you get your head chopped off. But they do all these things to terrorize the unbelievers, and then anyone who says, this is freaking me out, they call you an Islamophobe and complain to be victims. Isn't this? I mean, it's like insane. We want to scare. It's like if you're walking down the street and someone jumps out and goes, and you go, they go, oh, you bigot, why did you get scared? Like, you jumped out at me, dude. You jumped out at me and screamed. Oh, why should you be scared? Are you a bigot?
But that's the same thing again. That's the third terror. That then they terrorize you by making you think, well, wait a minute, I'm off balance now. Am I a bigot? Am I a racist because I'm thinking this? And so now you're on the defensive and you're worried about what you're doing, and they've made you the villain instead of having the attention on themselves for the terror they struck in you the first and second time. It's just like the moderate Muslims, the alleged reformers, and they behave in exactly the same kind of way, trafficking in the same insults and intimidation that the jihadis do, because they have the same kind of understanding of how to interact with unbelievers.
Interesting times ahead, Robert. Interesting times coming up.
Interesting times coming up, my friend. Okay, we have some stories out of France. Let's see. It's a little bit of supremacy of a different way. I'm sorry, not France, Germany. And in Germany, we have the story of Badar M. They don't give out the surnames in Germany. They thought that it would make people realize that a lot of these crimes were committed by the Muslim immigrants to the country, and that would prejudice people against the mass migration enterprise. They did not realize that actually the first names are the tip-off. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, because in the UK, that's exactly the impact that it has on people when they read these news stories. And then it would say, 27 people arrested in this grooming gang, have been grooming and pimping and drugging and gang raping 12, 13, 14-year-old girls. And even before I look at it, like, I'm betting at least a quarter of those guys are named Muhammad. And every single time, every single time, there was Muhammad, Ahmed, Ali, Muhammad.
Yep.
It's weird. Weird coincidence.
It is amazing. It's almost as amazing as the fact that these guys always shout Allahu Akbar. And that's exactly what Badar M shouted. He stabbed his wife 11 times, the mother of his 5 children, and killed her. And the prosecutor says he was of the opinion that she was his property and had no right to an independent life. He did not want to accept the separation she had left him and punish her for her desire for a self-determined life. Now, could that have anything to do with his Islamic beliefs, David? Surely not. I could think of like 27 different angles this guy could be going on from the Muslim sources. For instance, suppose he's a Quran-only Muslim. Muhammad Hijab himself has made a video pointing out that if you just go with what the Quran says, then the word for strike there in Surah 4, verse 34, where you can strike your wife if she's disobedient, it's the same word for striking the unbelievers in battle. And so Muhammad Hijab points out that without the hadith to tell you that there are limits on beating your wife, you just go with the Quran, and you would conclude that you can, you could just strike at her neck. You could chop her head off if you want to. So that guy could be going in a Quran-only direction, like Muhammad Hijab has said, or you have all kinds of, just Surah 4, verse 34, and Muhammad's comments on wife beating. A man will not be asked as to why he
beat his wife. If you fear disobedience or rebellion or whatever, which is exactly what this guy would have been fearing, you can beat her, and you could beat her until her skin turns green. If she's crossed the line to where you think she's not even a Muslim anymore, then you can start dealing with apostasy, rules about apostasy, and killing people for leaving Islam. And there you have Muhammad in Sunan ibn Majah says you carry out Allah's penalties even against your own family members. And so plenty of ways to justify that.
Yep. And out of Sweden, excuse me, out of Sweden, David, lovely place, a paradise of multiculturalism. I can't even get it out. We have another case of love and tolerance. This is a gentleman who actually made a video of himself. He went to a church, and this was Holy Family Catholic Church in Haninge, Sweden. And he started to shout the ubiquitous slogan, love for all, hatred for none. No, he was really shouting Allahu Akbar and throwing stones at the church. And now, this was a confusing detail about this story, and that is that he used a familiar epithet that I will not repeat as this is a family program, but he said it of Jesus, as in F, Jesus. Now, when I put this on Jihad Watch, and then it went out on Twitter, people were saying, see, he's not really a Muslim because Muslims revere Jesus as a prophet. A real Muslim would never say that about Jesus. So, what do you think? Was this guy a real Muslim or not?
I get insults towards Jesus from Muslims constantly, endlessly. Yes, saying F Jesus, saying Jesus was gay, Jesus was this. And it's usually after someone has insulted Muhammad that they will start heaping insults on Jesus. And when you point it out, when you say, hey, I thought you're a Muslim and I thought you respect Jesus and you respect Mary, and yet you keep saying all these things about them, they go, oh, I'm just talking about your version of Jesus, not the Isa of the Quran, who's the real McCoy. And so they justify it like that. And so that's their justification for like constantly saying things about Jesus, about Mary, about Abraham. I mean, they constantly accuse Abraham and Isaac and Moses of all being pedophiles and so on whenever Muhammad is up for discussion. And it's pointed out, hey, Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl. But this guy's a pedophile. That's a pedophile. That guy's a pedophile and stuff like that. And they start accusing everyone in the Bible of being pedophiles and say, wait, I thought you guys respected these guys. I'm just talking about your version of these things in your scriptures, which our prophet affirmed as the inspired word of Allah. But we'll let that slide.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And so he has no trouble cursing and using the name Jesus because he doesn't even think that is anyone at all, as Isa isn't even the Arabic word for Jesus. It's just a different name altogether. All right.
You know what's fun? Funny
Yeah.
when we try and figure out where they get the name Isa, because that's not the Arabic for Jesus or for Yeshua. Isa is the Arabic for Esau. And so there's a question of whether Muhammad heard his version of the name Isa from people who are actually making fun of Jesus by calling him Esau, the enemy of the Jews. And so because the Edomites became the enemies of the Jews, and so they would refer as an insult calling people Esau. And then so they end up calling Jesus Isa in Islam, and it's like, wait a minute, you're insulting him without even realizing it.
Well, considering that the Quran thinks that Jesus is Moses' nephew, it could well be.
And the Quran thinks that Jews worship Ezra as the son of Allah.
Yes.
And that the Trinity is made up of Allah, Jesus, and Mary. And it's like, I mean, this guy whoever wrote the Quran would not have passed like day one of Sunday school.
Indeed. But he never went.
Never.
All right, so we have another story out of France. The
Wait. Sorry, I just got to say it because I just thought of a skit.
yeah.
It's going to be vocab as Muhammad. He's going to be Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad goes to Sunday school. And he goes into Sunday school and he starts saying all this stupid stuff. Jews worship Ezra. And they're like, look, why don't you just read it right here? And he goes, I can't read. Right? That'd be perfect.
That's it.
That'd be awesome.
It'd be beautiful. All right, out of France. Actually, I realize we haven't had a story out of France yet. No, we did actually. Yes, Saint
You
Denis.
did. Yeah, we had
So
a story
we have,
about fall.
Yeah, and this one is in Béziers, Beziers, in the train station. A Muslim showed up armed with a knife, started waving the knife around and shouting. You know what he was shouting, David. And he was also shouting, I will kill you. So he's out there in the train station screaming, Allahu Akbar, I will kill you. The police show up before he actually stabs anyone, and they shoot him with a taser. Now here's where the miracle from Allah comes in, David. He was wearing a jalaba, and the jalaba was so loose around him that it deflected the taser beam or whatever it is.
Nice.
So he was unhurt, but he was indeed taken into custody. But you see the power of Allah.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. I know it's becoming a Dawa channel here. We got to be careful. All right, another one. We had a car chase in France. I'm sorry, I do not have video. And this guy was actually shot with a taser, and he was apparently not wearing a jalaba, so they got him. He is a convert to Islam, and he did not want to surrender to police, so he said, Allahu Akbar, I will blow them all up, and started to race down the road. They caught him. They brought him to justice, but of course he'll be out again in another year or so, and he can do it again then. And that brings us, I think, to stupid infidels section. Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's going to be getting out at the same time a bunch of these we've talked about many times before, all the people who went out and joined ISIS.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the courts knew what these people did and knew that they, so those people are getting long sentences, but other times all they knew was people going and joining ISIS and had no clue what they did. And those people eventually came back. And so those people got like 7-year sentences, 9-year, 10-year sentences for supporting a foreign terrorist organization. But those people are all going home. So you have actual ISIS members being released back into society. Wow. What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong, really? Okay, this is Abdullah Qureshi. Where can I get him here? There he is. There's Abdullah. You may remember him. He traveled over 200 miles in Britain to go to a predominantly Jewish area and assault Jews. And he hit a man over the head with a bottle. He slapped a young boy, and he punched a 64-year-old man so hard that he knocked him unconscious. All of them were Jews. It was clear that he was motivated by the anti-Semitism that is deeply ingrained in Islam. Quran says the Jews are the worst enemies of the Muslims, and so on. He got sentenced, David. What do you think he got as a sentence?
I mean, a guy who is horribly anti-Semitic and travels hundreds of miles to attack Jews. Obviously, that dude's doing 50, 60 years for hate crimes, anti-Semitic hate crimes.
He got 10 years, not prison, 10 years of not being able to contact his victims. That's it.
Well, and plus he's probably putting together his own remake of that classical Proclaimers song, I Would Walk 500 Miles. Like his version could be, I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500. No, I would walk 100 miles and I would walk 100 more. Just to be the guy who bashed this bottle over this Jew's head. And I don't know.
That's it.
Evil people, man.
That's his song. Meanwhile,
That's a pretty good deal. You go commit a hate crime against someone, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to teach you a lesson. You can't contact these people anymore. Yeah, okay.
yeah, it's incredible. I guess what happens after 10 years in the first day? Then he can just call them up, no problem, invite them to lunch. I don't know. It's very strange. Meanwhile, in Colorado, our friend Ahmed Al-Issa, there he is, being led away. He murdered 10 people in a supermarket in Denver, Boulder rather, in 2021. And since then he has been declared incompetent to stand trial. But he has now been declared competent. He can stand trial, although there's still quite a bit of controversy about it. Now, there's a lot of funny things about this story, David. For one thing, all his social media was still up when he first did the crime. I was able to see a lot of it, capture some of it before it was all taken down. And he universally spelled his name Al-Issa. A-L space I-S-S-A. And universally in the media reports about this crime, he is called Alyssa. A-L-I-S-S-A. And I think
but that's a girl's name, Robert.
Yeah, they say Ahmed Alyssa. And I wonder if they're trying to obscure his ethnic origins because they think it will be Islamophobic. But also, there's a salient point that nobody seems to have noticed, except me. David, the man is being led away after shooting 10 people in the supermarket, and he's wearing only his underwear. What's going on?
Is that dude, was he preparing for paradise?
That's it, man. What, can you explain this to our viewing audience?
Like, you are so confident that you're going to paradise for what you're doing that you show up naked for a blaze of glory so that, you close your eyes and you wake up and you're surrounded by your virgins, and all your wounds are these glorious things that smell like musk and so on, and they're super attractive to all the ladies of paradise and stuff. And so this dude's like, I'm gonna get shot and I'm gonna go killing a bunch of people until I get killed, and I'm gonna open my eyes and have virgins all over me.
That's it. There's no other reason why he would have gotten undressed, and there's abundant attestation for this. That the martyrs, for example, you don't have a funeral, you don't wash the body because the virgins find the blood on the body to be appealing. And so you are going physically into a physical paradise, and you're immediately going to have sexual relations with these virgins. So he's getting ready. It's also should be noted, you remember Muhammad Atta on 9/11 and how his luggage got flagged, but he didn't. And he had in his carry-on luggage a tuxedo. He was going to go in style to paradise. He was going to show up dressed to the nines, not naked, but dressed really sharp, and apparently impress all the virgins when he met them.
Looking like James Bond.
Yeah, but his luggage got flagged. He was still on the plane, but his luggage was not. So he did not get to greet them in that way.
Marion says the jellyfish virgins await. The Muslim sources say their skin is so pale you can see through their skin. It's like, that's not attractive. I don't want to see through your skin, but apparently for Muhammad, it's super attractive if a girl is so white you can see through her skin to the marrow of her bones and so on. Anyway, that's a good description. Jellyfish virgins.
Yeah, that got me there for a minute, but yes, you can see through them. All right, there was right before the actually a couple weeks ago, I should say, there was a terrible incident in Pakistan that was widely publicized where there was a Christian, actually I think two Christians, accused of blasphemy, and then the Muslims started rampaging, burning churches, burning the homes of Christians, and terrible incident altogether. Right after that incident, the Christian community in Pakistan is still reeling, even to this day, still traumatized, of course, and very worried about their life there in Pakistan. But a Pakistani official, Maulana Syed Muhammad Abdul Kabir Azad, that's his name, he welcomed the British High Commissioner, Jane Marriott, at his mosque where he is the Imam, the Badshahi Mosque. And he spoke about what was called in the news report from The Nation, the Pakistani paper, the recent tragic incident in Jaranwala. And he said that Islam guarantees the protection of minority rights. He told this to Jane Marriott. Now, David, do you think that Maulana Syed Muhammad Abdul Kabir Azad was being entirely on the level?
Not a bit. You could say there's some level of minority protection for Christians and Jews if they have agreed to a contract and so on. They accept dhimmi status and they are faithfully paying the jizya, that they are afforded some level of protection. So, but that's not going on in Pakistan. So you have no protection. I mean, I think history shows that you have no protection. Everything that happens over there, a mere accusation. Hey, this Christian woman said this, and that Christian woman and her whole family's lives are all ruined forever. Like best case scenario, they get out of the country. That's the only way they're not like dying eventually from mob violence or rotting in prison. And so, yeah, that's complete nonsense. And I have to say, even though these guys have to put on a good show and say, oh, we're not for all this, we've gone through the clips where, I mean, their television shows, hey, what are we going to do about this, apostates and blasphemy against Muhammad? Do we need to burn entire cities to the ground? And this is just all on Pakistani television. They have sheikhs on TV in Pakistan saying, what do we need to do? Do we need to burn cities to the ground to stop these guys and so on? And these guys promote it. They get everyone revved up. They're fine because they're not the ones actually doing it. They're just telling other people to do it. And then this Christian burned a Quran or desecrated a Quran or something, and then they start burning people to the ground, burning places to the ground. They go, oh, this is unfortunate. It's like, wait, you played the instructions on television. You told people exactly what to do, and then you go out and did it. By the way, I heard that like they find the Quran desecrated and it's like all signed. It's like, hi,
Yes.
I am a Christian and here is my name and here is my home address if you would choose to pursue me over this sort of thing. And it's like, how fake could you possibly make it? And they fall for it. So yeah, whoever's staging these Quran desecrations and so on knows how stupid their audience is.
Indeed. And since we're on the topic, this is Salwan Momika. And Salwan Momika, of course, is repeatedly burning or otherwise desecrating the Quran in Sweden. It is important to note what the media never reports, and that is that Salwan Momika is himself from Iraq. And he thus is likely to have a very deep and detailed understanding of what it's like to live among people who take the Quran very seriously. And that is why he is desecrating it. But that is never covered. The desecrations are covered in the Western press as if they were wholly and solely, in every case, just race hatred and Islamophobia.
And by the way, I mean, think about how nuts this is. This guy, he comes from ISIS territory, right? So he comes from a place that's dominated by ISIS, and he gets to, be familiar with the endless bloodbaths caused by ISIS. And how does he react? By insulting a book that that led to all this violence and bloodshed and deaths of Christians and minority Christian groups, and I mean minority Muslim groups, and Yazidis and everyone else. I mean, people being turned into sex slaves and so on. And he responds by insulting a book. I would look at that and I would say, wow, of all the death and bloodshed that you are familiar with for being in Iraq, that is a pretty balanced, level-headed response. It's just, I'm just going to insult the book. And everyone, oh, I can't believe that this guy who's familiar with all this death and bloodshed and mass murder and rape and stuff, he's insulting a book. What are we going to do? It's like, gosh, people grow up, man.
Well, unfortunately, it's just the opposite, David. Denmark, which has been under pressure along with Sweden because of the repeated Quran desecrations, is now going to ban desecrating the Quran.
Cowards.
And, yes, that's
cowards,
quite so.
all of them. Cowards,
That's,
whole country of cowards.
yes. Justice, so-called Minister Peter Hummelgaard, said that the country is going to prohibit the inappropriate treatment of objects of significant religious importance to a religious community, which of course is total hogwash, because do you think that if anybody stands up in Denmark and burns a Bible, that anybody's going to care?
No.
And nobody's going to get arrested, nor should they. But
No,
the Quran is what it's all about, and he's just, really what he could say is, please don't hurt us. And that would be exactly the same as what he did say.
Yeah, he's that's what they always do, because they can't make a rule. It wouldn't really pass just to say, okay, the only thing you're not allowed to do is criticize Muhammad or the Quran. They can't say that, because then people would say, no, you're singling that out. So they have to make some sort of blanket rule. But then you get around that by only enforcing it against when someone does something critical of Islam. And then that's the only time you enforce it. We've seen that before, like in Dearborn way back in the day, the ruckus up there, one of the causes of the ruckus was, you have the freedom in the United States of America to talk to people, to distribute materials and so on, especially on public sidewalks and so on. And so they didn't like that at the Arab festival, even in the area on the sidewalks around the Arab festival, as people are walking back and forth, you're handing them, handing them Bible tracts or something like that. They didn't like it. So they made a general rule. No handing out anything. No handing out anything. They made it a rule. But as you're walking down the sidewalk, people are handing things out left and right. Muslims are handing out pamphlets left and right. As soon as you're a Christian, you pulled out a Christian tract or a Bible, say, aha! And they pounce on you. And so that's what they do. They always make the rules that, they pretend that it's this, fair rule to all, and they only enforce it. In one direction. But yeah, Denmark, stupid move, because they just sent a big message to the entire Muslim world. You want to get your way with us? Just start threatening violence and threatening all this stuff and complaining and playing victim, and we'll do what you want. Guess what? Is that going to stop right now? No, not a bit. We're going to find out very soon. You can't make fun of Muhammad. You can't criticize Muhammad. You can't hurt people's feelings. And then they're going to have to come up with all these rules about not hurting people's feelings. And then we will, of course, ask, what about all these statements in the Quran that talk about Jews? What about these statements in the Quran that call for the violence against Jews and Christians? What about all these things? And that's all fine, even though that could hurt people's feelings. But the only feelings that matter are Muslim feelings. And that's exactly the way certain people want it.
Indeed. It's actually important to note in that connection that there are several Muslim countries that actually have a crime on the books, and that is hurting the religious sentiments of Muslims. And it's incredible how fragile they envision Muslim sensibilities to be, when meanwhile you have these imams calling for violence and doing violence against unbelievers, as we saw most recently in Pakistan. But also, there are all kinds of things elsewhere. For example, the Green Lane Masjid and Community Center in Birmingham, England. And the Green Lane Masjid, the mosque there, it has a preacher named Abu Usama, who back in 2007 was featured in the documentary undercover mosque. People went into mosques with hidden cameras and found all sorts of things being said. There was a controversy for a brief period, and then it was all forgotten, swept under the rug. Abu Usama is still there, even though he was filmed saying things like women are intellectually deficient. It's always amazing to me that something like that is presented as if it were extremist and controversial, when really, where does he get that idea? Where does Abu Usama get the idea that women are intellectually deficient?
That is a direct quote from Muhammad.
There you go.
By the way, it's always interesting when, as long as you say someone else said it, someone said this, some Muslim said this, that people will condemn it until they find out that it's actually Muhammad, and then they won't condemn it. So years ago, you may remember when Hollywood, a bunch of Hollywood actors and celebrities signed a document condemning Hamas. But they condemned Hamas because in their founding charter, it said, the Jews will be hiding behind the trees and rocks, and the rocks and trees will cry out. And they saw this and they said, hey, this is written in the founding charter of Hamas. And then all these Hollywood celebrities condemned it and said, yeah, it's a horrible thing. That's a horrible thing to have in your founding chart. And then, we pointed out, like, wait, they're just quoting Muhammad, and not a word of condemnation of Muhammad.
Indeed. That would be racist. Anyway,
against the whitest prophet in history.
Yes, indeed. I've been doing a lot of work in Ibn Hisham, Ibn Ishaq, and Ibn Sa'd, because as well as in the Sirah material in the Hadith, because I'm writing this book, Muhammad: A Critical Biography, and I think it's going to blow a lot of people's minds once it's done. But in any case, I was just actually the other day came across all that business. It's repeatedly said in the Hadiths that Muhammad was white, in all kinds of different traditions, different stories. It's not as if it was just one. So
and then the whiteness of his thigh, and the whiteness of his shin, and the whiteness of his armpit, and the whiteness of his belly, and they're like obsessed with talking about how white he was. And in Bukhari, like, a dude shows up and he says, which one of you is Muhammad? And they go, the white one. It's like, this guy makes Joseph Smith look like Malcolm X.
Anyway, just to finish the story about this Green Lane Mosque, David, where they're preaching about women being intellectually deficient, which of course the British press presents as some sort of crazy extremist idea that has nothing to do with the real Islam. This place got £2.2 million. That is in dollars, $2.7 million from the government's youth investment fund. So that's a real good stupid infidel story. Another one. Yes, sir.
Oh, I was saying, I read a comment real quick. Deja Vu Disciple said, 424, the like button.
What does that mean?
Well, yeah, 424. That's Surah 4, verse 24. Deja
That
Vu.
part I get.
Do you mean Surah 434? Because that would be, strike the like button. 424 would be rape the like button, because 424 is about raping female.
Oh,
captives.
I see. 424, the like. I got it. Yeah, he means 434.
Yeah, so Deja Vu. Do you mean hit the like button, because that would be 434, or do you mean rape the like button? I mean, you could be going extreme with on that like button, but yeah, just want to verify.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Another British story. The Cricklewood Muslim Youth Trust. The Cricklewood Muslim Youth Trust. They posted a tweet in December 2021. Keep away from the enemies of Allah, the Jews and Christians. Where'd they get that idea, David? These people are extremists, aren't they?
Yeah, gotta be, because the Quran's all peace and tolerance.
Yes. No, the Quran actually says that do not take the Jews and Christians as your friends, and so they're completely in line with that. But the Cricklewood Muslim Youth Trust, I don't understand how these people have these names. But anyway, that's Britain for you. They they allowed the the government allowed the Cricklewood Muslim Youth Trust to register as a charity in Britain. They don't care that these people are saying these things in Britain. They are so anxious to have Muslims that they can consider moderate that they don't even care when they're showing themselves to be immoderate in all kinds of ways. So I don't think I'm going to Cricklewood anytime soon. Anyway, this is Dr. Keith Wolverson. He's a happy man there in this photo. And Dr. Keith Wolverson is a general practitioner in the National Health Service, the UK's health system, until he was suspended over charges of misconduct. And the charges of misconduct, David, had to do with a walk-in center, they call it, an urgent care center at the Royal Stoke University Hospital. I don't know if that's anywhere near Cricklewood. And he said that he had a patient come in wearing a niqab, and the niqabi's daughter was sick, but he couldn't understand what the niqabi was saying. So he asked her to take off her niqab so that he could hear more clearly what she was saying and deal with the medical problem at hand. And for that he was suspended for Islamophobia. He has now been reinstated, the happy Dr. Wolverson, but he's going to be supervised. When he has Muslim patients, there's going to be somebody in the room to make sure he doesn't go all Islamophobic again on them. This is the world we live in today.
Yeah, notice the insane repercussions of all of this, because you got doctors and someone comes in and your job as a doctor is to treat the person. In order to treat the person, you have to understand what's being said and so on. You have to be able to examine people and so on. But you do any of that and they scream Islamophobia and bigotry. And then so you get punished. So then from then on, you're extremely nervous around people and kind of don't want to, I don't know, let someone else take this person because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And as soon as I say one wrong thing, I get suspended. And then you're an Islamophobe for not treating them like you treat everybody else. So it's this odd thing. It's like we want to be treated completely differently as some separate class that's superior to everyone else. And then as soon as you start treating them differently, it's, oh, look at you treating us differently, you bunch of bigots and racists and Islamophobes. This goes back. We were talking about this in the very beginning. It doesn't matter what you do. They complain, right? They complain no matter what you do.
Yep. Okay, let's bring it all back home, David, in the waning minutes. We have General Mark Milley. I really ought to have a photo of him, but unfortunately I do not have one ready. General Mark Milley is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He looks like a Soviet general, actually, because he's got medals, 20, 30, 40, 50 medals all over his uniform jacket, even though he's done nothing but lose. And he's a very with it modern general. But he has some news for us, David. He says that U.S. troops are going to be in Syria for many, many years to come. He says, I can't imagine that the United States would ever walk away. I think we'll remain committed for many, many years and decades to come. Now, this is not a political show, and so that's neither here nor there that the U.S. will be there, at least for our purposes. But this is why. This is what he said, that they have to fight ISIS. And why do they have to fight ISIS for decades in Syria? He said, the ideology is not yet dead. And so apparently if the U.S. troops are in Syria for many, many years and decades to come, eventually General Mark Milley thinks that he will arrive at a place where the ideology of ISIS is dead. Will he ever arrive at such a place, David?
I mean, in theory, if you completely wiped it out, but I mean, the ideology of ISIS comes directly from Islam's most trusted sources, and that's being preached around the world right now.
So even if you did, even if you could wipe out every ISIS member
It would
by
just
having
arise again.
troops in Syria,
Yeah,
exactly. That
yeah. Just look the other way for a few days, and it'll pop up again.
that's actually a lesson of my book, The History of Jihad. That there are groups like ISIS all through Islamic history,
Mhm.
and if one of them is defeated or wiped out, although I can't think of any that were ever actually wiped out entirely, but if one of them falls by the wayside in some way or another one will take it up, and it's the same ideology all the way through. But of
And it's a
course, doesn't think that. He thinks Islam is peace. And so this is some hijacked version of Islam.
yeah, and it's a this is the same reason that when notice because people say but all ideologies have their extremists, and they'll point to like Westboro Baptist Church and stuff, which goes around protesting funerals and so on. I'm not aware of them slaughtering a bunch of people, but notice you have a group like Westboro Baptist Church or something like that. You don't see Christians from around the world all flooding to them to join them, right? Because why? Because that's a local weird anomaly that doesn't actually arise from Christianity, and that's why you don't see this springing up all over the world. In Islam, notice as soon as ISIS said, "Hey guys, we're ready with the new caliphate," people started flooding out of France and the UK and all over the Muslim world and from the United States and from Canada, all going there. So all these people somehow all over the world. You can't say they were just under the spell of some guy in Iraq or something like that. They all had the same ideas from around the world, and when the call was raised, they all flooded to it. Then ISIS loses, and so okay, I guess this wasn't the real deal. But what happens now? You've got people around the world waiting right now for the next caliphate to arise, and they're going to flood. They're going to flood to join that.
Yeah, you have ISIS doing very well in West Africa, East Africa, and Southeast Africa. And there could very easily be an African caliphate in the next few years. All right, don't want to go without getting to this story. This is a memorial for a young lady who met a tragic end in Germany. Her name was Judith, and that is her photo there in the center, and flowers laid out for her. She was brutally murdered by her ex-partner Fahim Z, who stabbed her to death 45 times. Now, it's interesting to note that Fahim was a migrant, I believe an Afghan, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not seeing that in the story. So apparently not. No. Oh yeah, he is an Afghan. That's right. And so he's been in Germany for not very long, and she thought that, well, one of her friends said she assumed these men had a difficult past and needed her support. And so she reached out to the migrants. She got into a relationship with this one, Fahim, and then things started to go bad. He was violent toward her. She left him, and then, according to the indictment that Fahim was charged with, he started to think that Judith had no right to continue living under these circumstances, and he ambushed her and stabbed her to death. Now, surely this kind of behavior has nothing to do with Islam, David, correct?
Yeah. Once again, I mean, according to Muhammad Hijab, this guy could have just been a Quran only Muslim and say, the Quran says you can. I mean, this would be a wife, but you can strike them and so on. But I mean, if it's just an unbelieving woman, there are all sorts of justifications you can have for attacking them. But going back to what you said about this woman's being concerned that these guys had a troubled past and hey, they need your help and so on. Yeah, some people do have a troubled past, and that doesn't mean they're safe to be around. right?
Yeah, actually, it means just the opposite, that they
Yeah,
are not
someone.
safe to be around.
Yeah, you can say this guy had a messed up childhood and upbringing, and wow, you could be, all kinds of sympathetic towards that. Does not mean he's safe to be around.
Yep. And speaking of which, let's end with this gentleman, Mohammed Massoud, who is from Pakistan, and he came to the United States in 2018, and became he was a doctor, and he became a doctor at the Mayo Clinic, which is world famous in Minnesota. He was named a Mayo Bronze Quality Fellow, and conducted clinic trials. Well-respected doctor at a well-respected medical institution, the Mayo Clinic, and he eventually became one of those who joined ISIS. So nobody would have seen that coming. They would have thought, if anybody's a moderate Muslim, an assimilated Muslim, it's Mohammed Massoud. He's giving to the community and so on. And it's extraordinary that he still had this jihadi impulse within him, and he ultimately gave vent to it. We have come to the end of the hour, but David, there is a note here that reminded me there is the ongoing starvation of the Armenian Christians in Artsakh, which is also called Nagorno-Karabakh. It's an enclave, an Armenian Christian enclave within the Muslim nation of Azerbaijan. Armenia and Artsakh, or Nagorno-Karabakh, stand in the middle of, if you look on the map, an entire band of Turkish Muslim countries stretching from Turkmenistan to Azerbaijan to Turkey, and Armenia is in the middle. And so Armenia and Artsakh in particular are being crushed, starved out at this point. The only road that leads out of Artsakh into Armenia has been closed off, and the people there are starving. So that is yet another form of jihad.
So the Armenian genocide continues.
Indeed.
Is what I'm hearing.
You are correct, sir. And so, well, that is a story that has just been going on for months, and it gets worse all the time in a low-key manner because there aren't any incidents or spectacular mass killings or something of that kind, and we can hope that there never will be, but what's happening there is ultimately going to have the same effect, and of course there's global indifference because, once again, it would be Islamophobic to pay attention.
Yeah, and but if someone had just burned a Quran, then it would be international news.
Indeed. Yeah, maybe they should do that. In any case, thank you, David, for being here and for your insights. Thank you all for being with us. Be safe till next week. May God bless you. God willing, we'll have a show next week. We can hope there'll be no jihad, but I'm afraid there likely will be. So till then, pray, hope, and don't worry.